Hey, welcome to today's video. Today we're taking a look at professional sports and the DMCA. I'm Rick Chapo with DMCAagentservice.com. So why professional sports? Well, not just professional sports, but even college sports as well. We're looking at it because it's been in the news lately. Simply put, a number of teams have had their Twitter accounts suspended. And it's interesting to talk about and to look at because you can see the DMCA in action on a rather significant scale. Most people tend to think that teams of this sort probably wouldn't have DMCA and copyright problems, but in fact they do. And it's just an example that copyright applies to all, regardless of the size of your business or how much money it has. So what's been going on? Well, it looks like what's been happening is these teams have been publishing memes or creating memes and things of this sort, and maybe they're using either music or images that are copyrighted, and they're doing so without getting consent first. And so the copyright owners are then filing a complaint. And so the way that this would work is Twitter receives the complaint, and under Section 512C of the DMCA, they must then take down the content. And a lot of people don't understand that. They think that the platform will actually evaluate whether the copyright infringement claim is valid or not. That is not the way the DMCA is written. You're supposed to take down the content immediately. And at that point, you then send a notice off to the person who posted it saying, hey, we received a complaint. We've taken down the content. If you want it back up, you need to contest this complaint. It's called a counter notice. Now, in this situation, the team's accounts were suspended because it appears as though there were probably a number of different tweets that were out there that had allegedly offending content. And so Twitter just suspended the accounts. And it appears most of the teams went back in and deleted that content, and their accounts were put back in place. And so that's kind of a unique approach that you will see. Now, as far as the automatic takedown situation, I do realize that other large platforms don't necessarily follow that. So Facebook and YouTube will often evaluate the complaint and take a look at it, as will Google with Google search engines. And the reason for that is they don't really care about the immunity under the DMCA, to be quite honest. Because they have enough money that a copyright infringement lawsuit against them, even if it goes horribly bad, isn't going to amount to much. So, for instance, Google was recently fined $56 million in Europe for violations of the General Data Protection Regulation, the new privacy regulation there. And they barely blinked an eye. So a copyright infringement lawsuit for $200,000 or something of that sort, really isn't going to impact them. Now, if you have a website or an app, you're probably not in a position where $56 million is not a big deal. So you want to make sure that you do comply with the DMCA. Now, the interesting aspect of all of this that nobody's really talked about is what if these teams do it again? What if they post memes or, other content that violates the copyright of others? Well, then they could run into a very interesting situation where they might actually lose their accounts permanently. How could this happen? Well, under the DMCA, there's a section known as the repeat infringer area, and it's designed to deal with people who are just serial copyright infringers. So people who are going out and stealing courses and everything else and just infringing time and again, time and again, time and again. And what it says is these platforms have to terminate the accounts of people who do that, whether they be individuals or companies. So if, let's say, the Toronto Raptors went out and kept violating, the copyright of other people by posting memes, incorporating songs they didn't have the right to use, well, eventually their accounts would be closed. That's just the next step. That's what has to happen. Or Twitter would lose the benefits of the DMCA. Now you might be thinking, oh, that would never happen to a big, public entity like that, a sports team. But we have seen examples in the past, not so much with the DMCA, but in other areas, particularly with search engine optimization. Search engine optimization is the effort to get your site to rank high in the search results, particularly for Google, for various keyword phrases. And back in the aughts, 2000 to 2010 or so, there were a lot of different black hat techniques you could use to get ranked on Google. Black hat techniques are techniques that violate Google's guidelines but are effective. And to be quite honest, at that time, if you were in a competitive market, you almost had to use them because everybody else was. And so if you didn't, you would get crushed in the rankings. And we saw two companies actually run into problems with this. BMW, the car company, their US website was actually banned by Google at one point. because they were using a mirroring technique, I believe, to get themselves ranked high. You can go look it up. Just do a search for BMW plus Black Hat or BMW banned on Google, and you can read stories about it. The other company that was nailed was JCPenney. It was alleged that JCPenney was buying links. And by buying links, I mean buying many, many, many tens of thousands of links, and had mastered pretty much the Google rankings. They were buying links from very relevant sites, and they just dominated the rankings. And eventually, somebody complained, and Google figured it out, and JCPenney was suspended for a while in the rankings. They didn't appear anywhere. And so that was a bit of a mess. If you do a search for JCPenney plus Google ban or plus Black Hat, you can read some interesting articles. In fact, the New York Times even wrote an article on it and talking about how link manipulation occurred. So those were examples of big companies that ran into problems online. I often say that the internet is a pretty level playing field. Yeah, sure, the big companies have some advantages, but compared to the brick and mortar world, even if you're small, you have a chance to make an impact online. And this is kind of an example of how, the laws that apply online apply to everybody, regardless of how big you are or not. Now, I imagine most of these teams, they've talked to their attorneys, and their attorneys have probably written guidelines for their social media teams as to what is allowed and what is not. So we're probably not going to run into that problem. But nonetheless, if you eventually see one of these teams get banned from Twitter, that's probably what's happened. So anyways, that's it for today's video. Thanks for watching. Have yourself a good one.